Good morning, committee members. Oh, thank you, Madam Gladue. We will begin this 24th meeting of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills and Social Development and the Status of Persons with Disabilities. Today's meeting is again taking place in a hybrid format. Witnesses and some members of the committee are appearing virtually. I would ask those that are appearing virtually to speak slowly for the benefit of the interpreters who are doing the translation services for this meeting. If at any time there's a disruption in translation, please notify me and I will suspend while we get it clarified. I also remind members attending in person to respect the health protocols that have been established by the House of Commons Committee on Proceedings. I would also ask all members of the committee to address their comments through me, the chair, by using the raised hand icon if you want to get my attention. For those appearing virtually and those in the room, simply raise your hand. We will begin today's meeting with hearing from three witnesses on the Housing Accelerator Fund study that we began on Thursday, February the 3rd. And I would ask each member appearing, you have 5 minutes to give your presentation, and I would ask those witnesses to stay within their 5-minute period. For Blue Door Support Services, we have Michael Braithwaite, Chief Executive Officer. From Société d'Habitation Populaire et l'Est de Montréal, Jean-Pierre Rachette, Manager. And from the Neighborhood Land Trust, Joshua Barnett, got it? Executive Director. I will begin with calling on Mr. Braithwaite for your 5-minute opening statement.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here to speak about this very important study. My name is Michael Braithwaite. I am the CEO of Blue Door. Blue Door is an organization in York Region. Population up in York Region of about 1.1 million people, about on any given night 1,500 people experiencing homelessness. Blue Door's been around for about 40 years, and for the first 35 years we were focused on reacting, in a sense, just with emergency housing or shelter. And so we are the largest emergency housing provider for men, families and youth in York Region. Over the last 5 years, we've pivoted a little bit to not only providing emergency housing, but of course, looking at permanent and short-term and long-term affordable housing with wraparound supports. I have a housing-first approach with rent geared to income with those wraparound supports. So we've created a lot of housing through innovative thinking. And as everyone here is aware, it's a tough time. We are in a bit of a housing crisis, especially for our most vulnerable. So we've done that through innovative thinking, leveraging private donor funds to create sustainable, affordable rental housing for seniors, families, and to us LGBTQ plus youth. We've repurposed vacant and broken down housing case with Parks Canada home. We've worked with Parks Canada. They have 44 vacant homes in Rouge Valley Urban Park. We took one of those homes. We used our construction social enterprise to rebuild it, and it's now a duplex that will have truly affordable rents for the next 30 years. So it has a purpose as well. Blue Door has used funds from the Reaching Home and private foundations to purchase a fourplex and another home. A 3-bedroom home to provide affordable housing for women fleeing violence, families, and Indigenous men.
Mr. Braithwaite, could you hold for a moment? We're having an issue with translation. Excuse us for a moment. Sorry about that.
No problem.
We're going to spend for a couple of minutes while we get the technical issue clarified. We suspend. Members, we will resume, and sorry about that. We will proceed to the second witness, Monsieur Rachette, pour 5
Oui, bonjour.
minutes.
Oui, bonjour.
Hello. I'd like to thank the members of this committee for the opportunity to share some of our views on this issue on the Housing Accelerator Fund in Canada. I'd like to take a different tack than different people will And so we share the importance of rapidly and significantly increasing the supply of housing, particularly in major urban centers, in the context of a long-term housing shortage, especially of affordable housing and social housing. This shortage has destabilizing effects on economic development by reducing the supply of housing for small and middle-income workers who move away from their workplaces, increasing transport time and GHGs. It will also have devastating effects on the most vulnerable households who will find themselves on the streets for lack of housing. And these households will not only be made up of people with mental health problems or addictions. Our major urban centers will have to deal with social crises related to structural homelessness. The goal of our work, well, we're working in an urban center, and so we have to make an interpretation, a different analysis for a different setting. So the goal of building many affordable and social housing units is unavoidable. Several stakeholders will provide you with their perspectives and interests. For my part, I would like to draw the attention of the members of this committee to another issue of common interest that we feel is being overlooked, and we believe it's a blind spot in the drive to accelerate housing production. We need to accelerate the production of housing, but we need to ensure sustainability and take this opportunity to structure the affordable housing sector in Canada so it will be more efficient and financially self-sufficient. Here are some issues related to the structuring of the sector. Once these 100,000 new units will be produced, and given that a substantial portion of them will have to be affordable to meet the greatest needs, there is a need to ensure that they remain affordable, maintain their quality, and are well managed. Experience over the past 40 years has shown us that sustainability is far from being taken into account. The basic assumption is that if the funding for a housing project holds up, then by magic, the project will be managed well over the long term, ensuring sustainability of the project and its affordability. So, why should we be concerned about the long-term management of affordable housing stock? For different reasons that I'm going to lay out. Because property management is very complex, even more so in a large urban center where social dynamics can be extremely difficult and complex, because managing complexity requires expertise and specialized skills. These specialized skills require high salaries and organization with competent teams, and that they're able to retain these skilled workers. To pay these salaries, especially in large centers such as Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, there's a need for a few large social economy enterprises that can support these skill-related costs. All this is even more true with the severe labor shortage that imposes important wage adjustments to face the competition. Finally, I would like to note that larger companies will be able to innovate more easily, allowing them to adjust their actions to the evolution of our environment, which is changing more and more rapidly. In this regard, a case study of 2015 of some 15 housing nonprofits in Canada by Housing Partnership Canada highlighted the sector's significant challenges in terms of organizational capacity, sustainability, and innovation. All of this to say that we have a unique opportunity to structure the affordable housing sector in Canada for the long term and to foster the development of self-sustaining financial capacity by channeling responsible funding in addition to government funding to strong organizations. In Canada's major urban centres, there are organizations with some volume and development focus. To be competent, to be able to take on significant numbers of new units, and to attract responsible funding, it is imperative that they be larger. Economic analyses speak of a threshold of about 2,500 units. We therefore highlight to the members of the HUMA committee that in accelerating the production of these 100,000 units, we're going to have to promote sustainability and affordability. I know that smaller cities have challenges as well, but In major urban centers, these issues are very, the needs are extremely strong. So here are our following recommendations. In accelerating the production of these 100,000 units, particularly in the major urban centers, where a significant numbers of these units will be built to favor organizations that already have a high volume of housing and expertise to promote the sustainability and affordability of these new units. To encourage the integration or merger of these larger social economy enterprises in order to accelerate their development and bring them closer to the organizational threshold that can support sustainable expertise. In this perspective of consolidation of the sector, among other things by consolidating the stronger players, it will be necessary to provide funds for organizational development to support this transition. In doing so, with very large real estate assets, these organizations will be able to qualify even better for more autonomous funding. I'm thinking of the workers' funds, of charitable foundations, of pension funds. Finally, so who are we? The Société d'Habitation Populaire de l'Est de Montréal. Oftentimes we're called SHAPEM. It's an enterprise which was founded 34 years ago in 1988. We are responsible for housing stock of approximately 1,750 units in about 100 buildings, 1,000 owned, 750 managed for third-party nonprofits. Of these 100, about 40% were built outside of the government programs with the help of patient venture capital, such as the Fonds de solidarité de la FTQ, Fondation Chagnon, religious communities.
To conclude, we've gone well over the 5 minutes.
Oui, je finissais la description de...
I was just finishing the description of our organization. The value of our owned assets, 150 million in assets under management. We are active in 7 boroughs of Montreal. Our team, 45 people. So thank you so much. I hope that I didn't take up too much time. Thank you.
Monsieur Racette. Now to Mr. Barndit from the Neighborhood Land Trust. For 5 minutes, please.
Hello, honorable members. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Joshua Barnes, and I'm honored to depute on behalf of the Neighborhood Land Trust. I'm coming to you here today from the neighborhood of Parkdale in Toronto. The Land Trust owns 85 buildings with 205 units of affordable rental housing. Our primary strategy for producing affordable housing has been to acquire existing rental housing and convert that housing to permanently affordable rental housing. Over the past years, our organizations and others have struggled to access funding through the National Housing Strategy to support this work. I would like to speak to you today about the crisis of increasing unaffordability of rental housing stocks and how we believe the Accelerator Fund could respond to this. In order to contextualize our recommendations, I will present, I'd like to share the housing affordability challenges that residents in our community are experiencing. Firstly, in South Parkdale, 11,000 households are tenants. This represents 87% of residents. As Toronto experiences a housing affordability crisis, a large majority of local residents experienced a crush of market-driven rent increases, evictions, and displacements. In 2021, our organization undertook a neighborhood-wide research study looking at the changes in affordability of the rental apartment building submarket, consisting of 68 private rental towers with a total of 6,060 units. Our research documented a troubling trend of consolidation of ownership of this housing stock by financialized landlords, with 71% of units currently owned by large corporate landlords and REITs. Among many extractive business strategies, the acquisition of low end of market rental housing and the subsequent rent increases of asking rents in these buildings is integral to the financialized landlords' business strategies. This is translated into the prevalence of aggressive above guideline rent increases and eviction applications. The advertised rents in South Parkdale increased dramatically from 2015 to 2018 by 36%. In 2018, none of the large landlords offered units for less than $1,400, a rent level 40% higher than the CMHC average rents for the area. These dramatic rent increases and eviction threats have destabilized everyday life of tenants, 50% of whom live below the poverty line, and a majority of whom are BIPOC residents and immigrants. About 50% of our survey respondents, tenants living in these buildings, now live in severely unaffordable housing by spending more than 50% of their income on housing on rent. In addition, tenants have faced increased financial burden, with 40% disclosing an inability to pay for medicines and food which they require. So what is a tangible solution to secure and maintain the supply of affordability of rental housing stocks? Through jurisdictional research and consultation with tenants, community organizations, housing experts, and municipal government officials, we've identified that the most effective means of preserving and producing, as well as maintaining the affordability of rental housing stocks, is the acquisition of private rental housing by the public or nonprofit organizations, and the conversion of these properties to permanently affordable rental housing. It is important to note that the acquisition of rental housing was a key strategy utilized to produce co-op housing in the 1970s to 1990s. Unfortunately, the National Housing Strategy has failed to support the acquisition of rental housing, the most rapid and cost-effective means of securing permanently affordable housing. A national acquisition funding stream is direly needed as part of the Housing Accelerator Fund. Countless advocates have already proposed such a program. FCM's 2020 white paper, coined COVID-19 and Housing, Critical Need, Urgent Opportunity, proposed of one of two goals, which was to acquire and protect modest rent market housing. FCM specifically identified the federal government has an opportunity to empower community housing providers and their municipal partners to purchase existing relatively affordable private rental housing at a much lower cost than building new affordable housing. While this goal has not yet been realized, it's not too late to act. So why is an acquisition program a really good idea? Well, given today's high land costs and construction costs, preserving the existing supply of affordable rental units is faster and more economical than building new affordable units. Acquisition projects are economically efficient way to secure the supply of rental housing, costing 30 to 60% less than new construction projects. Lower costs, of course, means more units are produced through public investment. Because the buildings in question are already integrated into the neighborhood fabric, preserving rental housing supports government policy objectives of maintaining the stable and well-served mixed income neighborhoods while reducing neighborhood disruption caused by new construction. Acquisitions also curb the flow of vulnerable tenants into homelessness. For existing tenants, their housing becomes secure and remains affordable. In addition, as units are available on turnover, acquisitions accelerate access to affordable housing for those on affordable housing waiting lists and in shelters. I'm almost done, so thank you for your time. So what is needed for an acquisition program to work through the Accelerator Fund? Canada needs a funding program that is a hybrid of CMHC co-investment and the Wrapping Housing Initiative. This program must include 1, low interest financing similar to the NHS co-investment program. 2, a capital grant or forgivable loan funding similar to RHI. However, where RHI projects in Toronto required $350 to $600K per unit to produce, an acquisition project would require 1/3 of that at $100 to $250K per unit. Funds, and then this is number 3, funds need to flow rapidly as acquisition projects move at the pace of the market. The city of Toronto has exemplified a means of governments to disperse funds rapidly for acquisition through a new multi-unit acquisition program, which they call MURA. The NHS should consider a similar program design or simply provide the funds to municipalities to disperse locally and rapidly. I think that this committee could consider providing those funds directly to municipalities and encouraging municipalities to produce similar programs as the City of Toronto. So in conclusion, the Neighborhood Land Trust seeks to advise the committee that the most effective means for the federal government to accelerate the availability of affordable housing is to support public and or nonprofit acquisition of rental housing properties through a federal acquisition program funded through the Accelerator Fund. Thank you so much for your time, and good luck on this very important task.
Thank you, Mr. Barndit. And we'll now open the floor for questioning, beginning with Madame Kuzi for 6 minutes. And I will advise witnesses at the timeline. I will interrupt and ask you to conclude so that we get to all the as many members as we can. Madame Kuzi for 6.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, witnesses, for being here today. Merci aux témoins pour être ici aujourd'hui.
Thank you for the witnesses for being here.
Sorry, I didn't understand exactly where does your funding come from to purchase these units? I'm sorry, it wasn't clear to me from your introduction. Currently.
Currently, we've depended on two streams of funding for the acquisition of rental housing. One is municipal grants. Initially, our one initial project was undertaken through Section 37, which was funding received by the municipality through development bonusing. And then now the City of Toronto has created the MURA program, which provides access to grant funding from the city. So we apply to that program now through a formal application. In addition, last year, in the absence of either a municipal program or a provincial or federal program, we raised investment from nine foundations, impact investors, who provided us short-term financing to acquire a building and get it out of the market to ensure that we preserve that affordable rental. But nonetheless, like that impact investment really provides gap financing, not long-term funding or financing. So we need a government solution and a government program to provide that support. The other thing I'll say is that we did seek to put projects together through the RHI program. And we had three unsuccessful applications, partially due to the fact that RHI excluded the acquisition of rental housing unless that rental housing was fully vacant or dilapidated, which in our mind was really an ineffective sort of category or an ineffective qualification, because in fact we want to buy the better buildings, the buildings that are tenantable, that are in good condition, that can provide good housing. And one of the things that we hear a lot from naysayers of acquisition programs is that we need to produce housing that is vacant so that we can move people out of shelter into that homes. And what we find actually is that we have, because of the natural turnover in rental housing, we actually have access to a lot of housing. So in the time it would take to build a building, 2 to 3 years, we can actually have enough vacancy to sort of produce that flow and bring people into housing at a similar rate to new construction projects. And in fact, moving forward, because those buildings are nonprofit owned and linked to access plans from the City of Toronto's affordable housing waiting list, we provide ongoing access to housing moving forward as well for those in need.
How would you say that inflation has impacted housing affordability, and what do you think would help your tenants and these foundations in terms of mitigating the impact of rising inflation in Canada and the impact that this house has on your land trust?
That's an incredible question, very important. So I can tell you, we actually we have a building that we were seeking funding from the City of Toronto for, and we had a business plan to acquire that building. And we initially, about 6 weeks ago, we required $4 million in capital funding to make that project work. It was a 36-unit building, and we could finance the rest. Just in the last 6 weeks, rates have increased so significantly, and the 10-year terms offered by banks have just escalated by about 2% at this point, even though while the government's rates have increased only a little bit, the 10-year terms that banks are offering have escalated by about 2%. And that meant that our capital requirement for investment grant funding increased by over $1 million, by $1.4 million to 5.4 million. So the interest rate escalation is significantly impairing our ability to finance these projects, and to actually what it translates to is to a higher need for capital funding. So I think on one side, I think while interest rates are higher, we're going to need more capital grant funding. But in addition, I think nonprofits really do continue to need access to low interest financing through CMHC, and so those that is going to continue to be extremely important to assist with our work.
And similarly, how would you say that the challenges around supply chains and labor shortages have impacted your land trust?
Yeah, thank you also for that question. We do not build new housing. We acquire existing buildings. So we benefit from the fact that those buildings exist already. So our projects are not slowed down by supply chain issues. We can acquire those buildings today. Of course, once you own a building, especially a building that might be a little bit older, there's a need to renovate those buildings and improve them and repair them over time. So of course, we are experiencing some cost escalation due to supply chain needs and labor shortages. But the benefit of having a tenantable building day one is that, you can plan for those repairs over time. And in many cases, especially when we're purchasing better buildings, we can provide affordable housing to those who need it while we experiencing those delays in sort of securing the labor and getting the additional funding and financing to afford the repairs. So we're finding that we can continue to provide the benefits to the city and to residents of Toronto, even with these shortages. But of course, they can slow our work down a bit. But I think in an acquisition context, they have less impact than they would on a new construction projects, which are experiencing huge cost escalations and huge delays.
Thank you.
Now to Madame Martinez Serrata for 6.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. Ma question.
Thank you. My question will be for Mr. Aracet. Jean-Pierre, thank you for your presentation today. The issue of climate change and how we are seeing gentrification because rents are going up, and this is having an impact on climate change as well. I would like to hear you speak to funding, because you touched on this at the end. Today's study has to do with how we can make sure that a new fund, it would be called the Housing Accelerator Fund for municipalities, how this can support the creation of housing. My question, how do you foresee that a fund that would look like the rapid fund that was created during COVID, would this be a way of deploying funds more quickly? Could you speak to the funding context? How can we support you better? All right. You have 1 minute. So please quickly. I know you, so 1 minute. Yes, it's important. It's important that SHLs can put funding. I know Quebec better than other places. So, for example, the Solidarity Fund and the Chagnon Fund, there's a short-term issue, and I'm quite close to what Mr. Brandt was saying. We have to seize opportunities as they arise. There's an importance here. We have to work over the shorter and the longer term to work together with other organizations, religious communities, solidarity funds, or large foundations to try to raise available funds. We've had several projects like this, and then there's the question of longer-term funding with interest rates and try to reach a financial equilibrium. So with existing funds, existing foundations, is that what you're saying? Municipalities as well, but there's a whole issue of entrepreneurship and acting quickly, and managing public funds requires a certain amount of constraints, and we have to, from the onset, we have to have funds that are more flexible to attract from the market, to be able to do a correct analysis of public funds to invest is necessary, because when we talk about projects in Montreal, it can take up to 1 year to do a year and a half to do the analysis. And you cannot keep land with a year and a half with an offer of purchase. Yes, thank you, Jean-Pierre.
Quickly will be to Mr. Barnt. Joshua, last week we had Ms. Abby Bond from the Housing Secretariat in Toronto. She referenced the MURA program, and she talked about, as you have this morning, the importance of flowing the funds as quickly as possible to municipalities and service providers to ensure that we avoid some of the issues that Ms. Kuzi raised earlier in terms of the rising interest rates and the inflation issue. So can you expand upon the MURA fund and elaborate on the importance of flowing the funds quickly to nonprofit service providers and municipalities?
Thank you so much for the question. Yeah, so our organization has been working to acquire rental buildings for many years. prior to partnering with the City of Toronto, we experienced 17 failed acquisitions due to the fact that there weren't appropriate programs to support our work. The MURA program came out of collaboration between the City of Toronto and nonprofits such as ours, who saw this, the acquisition of rental housing as important. There was a pilot program in 2019, which is evaluated. Our organization accessed funds through that pilot program, and that pilot program was successful. And the city now has sort of matured that pilot program into an ongoing program. What it provides is a two-stage RFP process. So there's a two-stage review process. The first stage is a pre-approval or pre-review of the organization. So ensuring that the organization is financially sound, has an appropriate strategy, has operating and acquisition experience. And then that organization can be pre-approved to go out into the market and bid on buildings for a pre-approved amount of funding per unit. That enables the organization to actually go and provide an offer on a building, knowing that it has access to funding quickly. And once that organization finds that building and puts the business plan together, undertakes the due diligence, they submit a package to the city, and the city commits to reviewing and approving or denying that fund on an accelerated basis. I think it's 30 days. So that allows an organization to go and actually compete effectively in the private market and actually sort of like participate respectfully in the private market, because, you know, nonprofits often go out and they have to pull together a lot of different complicated funding and financing to make a project work. And they're convincing a private owner to be part of that deal. So when we go with what we need, it means that we're respecting sort of the way the market works, and we're working well with the private sector to transition that housing to a long-term ownership with affordable rents built in. So this program is great in that way. It also provides a few additional pieces of funding that are key to make this work. So it provides deposit funding, so gives the organization a bit of money to put down a deposit, as well as due diligence funding. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Bernard. Madame Chabot, pour 6.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to the witnesses. Thank you for your expertise and your testimony. We know these large urban centers well. I know Montreal quite a lot better. I'm going to try to ask a question. I'm asking it to both of you, actually. How concretely can we ensure, and we are looking at this new procedure for a new fund, how can we make sure that it will be significant? This new fund is proposing 100,000 new units between now and 2024, 2025, $4 billion over 5 years. We heard a witness last week say that maybe we should speed up the funding process. Rather than looking at $4 billion over 5 years, we should go more quickly, because construction takes a lot of time, or even acquisition can be a lengthy process. On the other hand, to look at funding per project, is this a type of solution that seems appropriate? I'd like both of you to answer.
Est-ce que j'y vais en premier?
Do I go first? I'm going to go first. So we need to see that, of course, this is a complex issue. The last two projects that we went ahead with, they were heritage buildings. They were wonderful buildings, but it took 1.5 years, 2 years to go through the paperwork because of that. So there are real limits. There are procedural limits. There are regulations that we cannot go around. However, if we have funds to enter into the market, yes, this is fundamental. So we are looking at funds outside of the city, but in a reasonable fashion. There's one thing. It is organizational capacity. 100,000 housing units is a lot of housing stock in 3 years. And so I was highlighting the organizational ability. Everyone in the nonprofit center will arrive at the same conclusion. You need long-term funding. You need community support. But for the issue of organizational capacity and skills, this is something that is fundamental. So I'm not really answering your question, I know, but I would like to highlight this because it might block that element. So, and the construction delays also, you can purchase older housing, but you have to think about construction, because if you take out everything that is used, the middle class. Thank you. Thank you. I would like to hear the other witness speak to this.
Yes, thank you so much. The City of Toronto this year has put $20 million into the MURA fund. If we assume that the top amount per unit that's allowed of 200,000 per unit is provided to those projects, that would produce 100 units. So, if the City of Toronto, for example, received 200 million from the federal government or more, we could exponentially increase the amount of units that would be produced. So I think a quick funding of municipal programs where those municipal programs exist, would create fast impact. And you're correct to say that as we see escalation of interest rates, the sooner we act, the better. In addition, I think as we continue to see the pressure of both COVID, economic pressure on vulnerable people, but also on rents, we could see an escalation of the homelessness crisis. So the faster we act, I think, the more likely that we can sort of curb that increase of the homelessness crisis and ensure that people are in secure housing. So I think, of course, putting money out soon it would be very beneficial. And then similar to the past comment, it also would be important, I think, to sustain it for some period so that projects can come together over time, because projects aren't always possible today. Sometimes in 2 months or 3 months or a year, additional alternate projects, great projects can come forward. So having some form of a program that has sustained funding that allows to put projects together over multiple years would be beneficial.
Une sous-question à votre réponse.
I have a sub-question to your answer. So if we succeed, because yes, it's 100,000. 100,000 seems like an awful lot, but it's throughout Canada, so let's remind ourselves of that. So if we succeed in the timeline set out as the government wishes, how to make sure that these housing units will remain affordable? How can we make sure of this for the future? And should we revisit the definition of affordability?
Thank you for the question. If you don't,
a 10-second answer.
Sure. It's very important that capital funding and low-interest financing provided by the federal government goes to housing models that have a specific commitment to long-term affordability. That includes co-ops, nonprofit organizations, public entities, and community land trusts. We need to be looking at affordability periods of 49 years at a minimum. People need housing in the long term, and we've invested much too much money in short-term affordability. It's a good deal for governments to do this as well, because of course the public money put into projects will produce longer-term public benefit. So that funding is better used when invested in projects where there's long-term affordability requirements and commitments. Thank you.
Mr. Bandit. Merci, Madame Chabot. Now to Madame Zerillo for 6 minutes.
Could I go ahead?
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to thank both of the witnesses today. This testimony is so important, and it is my wish that this testimony gets the government thinking differently, reframing how the Accelerator Fund could actually also promote purpose-built rentals, stable, already built housing. So I guess my first comment is that this Accelerator Fund cannot incentivize financialization of housing. And I would ask Mr. Barnt about the Ready Now model, the purpose-built rental, that could create the right supply more quickly. So my question to Mr. Brandt, and then if there's enough time for Mr. Assad, I'd also like to hear from them. How much time can be saved? How much more less expensive can it be to build them? And how many more units could we get if we spent a little bit more focus on the already built housing units, purpose-built rental?
Thank you so much. Our analysis in our community is quite clear that the acquisition of an existing rental unit, the costs come to around 200 to 300,000 per unit. To produce the same unit new, it would cost between 450 and 600,000 per unit. So the costs are significantly more. And in addition, the timelines are significantly faster. We can identify a property that's available for sale, get a deal, undertake due diligence, and acquire that building within a 3 to 4 month period. Where a new construction project, we're looking at a minimum of a 2-year period. Even with the rapid housing type projects, they've generally been delayed, and they are taking 1.5 to 2 years. So we can act much quicker. And of course, if the costs of the projects are lower, what that means is we can actually, with the government funding we have, we can produce more units.
And Mr. Rosset?
Stratégie, si je m'enligne.
So the strategy would be to remove as many housing units from the market over the short term. We need funds for this. And the second thing, we can expect in 2, 3, or 4 years. We've already acquired some buildings. It took 20 years before transferring them back to subsidized housing. So we have to ensure that there is funding for the transition period. This can be long as well. We need funding for this. In Montreal, what's happening is that especially affordable housing units with a lower rent, and we try to withdraw from the market, there will be sold at a price that imposes on the market higher rent prices. So what's happening right now is that when there is a building with lower rents sold, people who are buying it will find a way to evict the people that are living there. They're going to hike the rents of 200, 400, 500 a month. And the problem is that if you're in the market, well, we're going to have to negotiate and also to support funding for rent. That is not enough to cover the operating costs. For example, if the extra cost is $500 a month, we have to pay $200, $300 to support this cost difference. The prices in Toronto and Montreal and Vancouver are not the same, but the logic is the same. Our rents, for example, $700, $800. If it's affordable, but if the building is sold, you'll be able to rent it for $1,200. So the analysis will impose a hike in order to support this period over the longer term. This is what's required. So
interrupt Mr. Assad because there's so much more I want to hear from both of you. So I'm going to ask, because I know my time is running out, if possible, I've always wanted to probe into this operating agreements and the problems with the legacy operating agreements and housing. If there's any written submission that you could, both of you could put to the committee, that would be wonderful. And Mr. Chair, can I ask also for Mr. Barnt if we could get a copy of the study done out of Toronto that he spoke of? And I wonder if I could get it as well, Mr. Barnt. I'd like to share it with my cities in my ridings. And is my time up, Mr. Chair?
No, you have 1 minute and 10 seconds.
Oh, I still have a minute. Okay, so I'm going to ask, what is the number one thing we need to do to make sure this fund does not incentivize financialization of housing? Maybe Mr. Rosset and then Mr. Barnt.
Mr. Rossetti, shall you go first?
Oui, j'essaie de...
Yes. I'm trying to answer correctly. Right now, there's a lot of capital to withdraw from the market. So to add capital to withdraw from the market, this will encourage a price increase. We're not going to be able to go against the market forces. What we would need is, I don't know, to have 400,000 or 500,000 extra lodging units in Canada. The pressure would go down, so it's hard. We can't go against the market right now. So it's a race to withdraw where there's a more opportunity to maintain affordable housing, but it's hard. Right now, there are prices that will make sure that rents will double, and I don't have a magic solution. I don't really know what to say.
And Mr. Byrne, you probably can answer that follow-up with a question from another committee member. We're going to go to Madame Gladue for 5 minutes and to Mr. Coteau for 5, and that will conclude the first group of witnesses. Madame Gladue.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for appearing. My first question is this. We see that there is an affordable housing crisis across the nation, but in every place, whether it's an urban place or a rural place, there are different needs to go address that problem. And it's my view that the municipalities, for example, in Sarnia-Lambton, we have got a 5-year plan. We know what kinds of affordable housing we need to get, how we provide for those that are lower income, address the homelessness, and all of these things. And so I'm sure other municipalities are similar. It's my view that what the federal government ought to do is fund directly to the municipalities, because then they know the organizations that are there, that are doing the good work on the ground, and they can operate at a pace that reacts to the market. So I think that's the best way. And I would ask each of the witnesses, do you agree? And if not, then how would you recommend we move forward?
Thank you so much for the question. I absolutely agree that municipalities, in being local, have an understanding of the local needs and have collaborations with the partners that they need to work with for success. So can sort of target programs to the needs. So absolutely, providing funding to the municipalities is very important. But when doing that, it's extremely important that CMHC or the federal government does not put strings on the use of that funds or limits on the use of that funds that restrict the kinds of strategies that municipalities have wanted to do but have not been able to do through CMHC funding and financing. So we need to allow for the flexibility to allow cities to decide, yes, an acquisition of rental housing program is an important strategy, so that's what we want to use here. RHI didn't do that. It came with very strict restrictions on the type of projects that were eligible. And so it limited the municipality, at least in Toronto here, to do the type of strategy that it felt was needed. And in fact, we were working with the municipality pre-RHI to secure a building which the city believed would be a great RHI program. We actually pre-secured, like we got an agreement of purchase and sale. And then when the guidelines were announced, we lost that project. So just please don't tie the hands of municipalities by restricting the use too much. Of course, it's important to have some form of restrictions to ensure the funds are used well, but respect the municipalities are the experts of what's needed for their residents. Thank you so much.
Monsieur Rassett, qu'est-ce que vous pensez?
What do you think, Mr. Rassett? In Quebec, these types of things are different. We have the Société d'Habitation du Québec, and it's a housing organization responsible for the funds. Municipalities are more agile and know the terrain. And the issue in Quebec would be to ensure that you have to make sure that there is fairness. Municipalities and the federal government have to agree. Sometimes there are small municipalities that don't have the ability to act. And so if Quebec is not working on a regional basis, for smaller municipalities, this can create an issue. So there's a political issue in Quebec, but it's clear that cities know the field a lot better, and they are better placed to find solutions.
that I think is making the problem worse and doesn't really have a solution has to do with immigration. You know, we see the temporary foreign workers that are coming, that are looking for affordable housing. We now have in my riding 100 Ukrainian families that are coming that will be sponsored by people, which is great. But as they start to support themselves and move out and look for housing, it's not there. And with Roxham Road, we have a steady stream of people coming in. So I don't see that there is a plan. Do you have any suggestions on what the government could do to help there? Monsieur Racette.
You know,
Oui, nous, on a l'expérience.
Yes, we have lived experience with Montreal North. This is a neighborhood where there are many, many new immigrants. So we have strategies according to different territories. So you have to look at different neighborhoods. So we're providing a community, not just a housing unit. This is our vision, is to create inclusive and unified communities. So you have to look at the urban center, and naturally, there are some places where people are welcome. There are new immigrants, and so we have to it's not just a project that will fall down from the sky. No, we have to have strategies according to where this is. With immigration, we have about 50,000 new arrivals a year. And so these people, these new immigrants, about 80% of them are in Montreal. And so they settle in some neighborhoods. And so this creates a challenge for integration. So we cannot neglect that part of the issue. When we talk about investment, we need to have overall strategies.
If you could submit your answer in writing to the committee, that would be great. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Racette. Now to Mr. Coteau for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the witnesses today. You know, this issue around affordability, housing, it's a huge issue, and I know it impacts the entire country. But in my city, in my riding, I know that currently there's 81,000 home requests just for Toronto community housing, which is just astonishing. And I know that that's replicated right across the country. So I just want to say thank you to the witnesses for the work they're doing to look for alternatives to bring affordable housing. So I guess my first question is to Joshua. You talked about the difference between short-term and long-term affordability. You said 49 years versus a short-term period. Can you explain that a bit more briefly, please?
Yeah, so you know, one basic example is in the city of Toronto, when a rental building is demolished, rental replacement policies require that the affordable rental units in that prior building be rebuilt in the new building, and that they be affordable for 10 years. So that produces an affordable unit for 10 years. What we often find is at the end of that 10 years, as units turn over, that those rents are increased to, you know, very, very, you know, above market rents. So, you know, that like there's an idea that we're producing affordable units, but they just disappear at 10 years. In the US, they've experienced crises of this, of funding, you know, hundreds of thousands of affordable units that had 20-year affordability periods. And then when those periods end, they are gone.
Sure.
And so it's very important that we, you know, when funding is going to a project, that the affordability requirements be long-term, like the life of a person. Someone needs to live there, and actually, should be, you know, the affordable housing should be there past that tenant, so that it's available to future members of that community. So we advocate for 49 years of affordability, which is, you know, a very long-term period. Thank you.
Jump back in. Quick question, like, you know, we all use this term affordable housing. Maybe to both witnesses, very briefly, is there like a common definition of what that actually means? And does it mean different things in different jurisdictions? Because I think it's important for us to all be on the same page when we talk about what affordable housing really means.
Tout à fait. Il faut considérer.
Yes, we need to consider the ability of households to pay. So with affordability, we can take 50% of the price paid, but if the rent doubles and the revenue didn't double, Well, to talk about 30% of the revenue, I mean, this is the type of target we have to aim for. As for affordability over the longer term, I think that owners, it has to be non-for-profit organizations. Otherwise, the incentive to sell with the capital gain cannot be avoided. The other thing I would like to highlight is that over time, nonprofit housing organizations are able to refinance, but for the development of affordable long-term housing, of course, this is a short-term crisis, but everything that we will do in 15 or 20 years, these buildings will have, such as in the private sector, this will allow to build, to purchase, to renovate existing housing units, or to develop. So this has been neglected in Canada. Projects are set up, and we don't look at the organization.
I want to just get a good, I probably have a minute and a half left. I want to get maybe a definition from Joshua on what does it mean when we talk about affordable housing from your perspective, and is there a universal kind of definition that's out there?
There's definitely not a universal definition out there. In Toronto, the City of Toronto defines affordable housing as housing that is below 100% of average market rent. The city's funding programs target rents to be set at 80% of average market rent or less when they are providing capital funding or other significant incentives. Of course, in the City of Toronto, 80% of average market rent is not affordable to all residents. So when nonprofits put together projects for folks who are lower income, we will often layer in rental housing supplements or other forms of rental supplement like an RGI supplement to ensure that the tenant has an affordable rent that is their portion of the rent and that the subsidy is meeting that difference. And so all projects that target lower income people or folks on fixed income like ODSP, Ontario Works, or OAS require those types of layered rent supplements in addition to the other supplements. In addition, in the US, a common strategy is to have mixed buildings owned by nonprofits where there are some rents that are provided above market that subsidize the lower rent units for folks who need the lower rents. So that's also a model that is more common in the US, but we should be increasing the use of that here in Canada.
Much. Thank you to both of you. Thanks.
Thank you to the witnesses. As you can see, this is an engaging subject, and thank you for your contribution. I would ask as well, a number of the committee members asked you, if you have anything written that you would like to submit to the committee, please do submit it through the clerk that you think may help us in this study. So again, thank you for taking the time to participate this afternoon, and we will suspend for a moment while we change to the next group of witnesses. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. each one of you introduced yourself, and the committee knows who you represent. We have the City of Montreal, the City of St. John, and the Town of Newmarket. And each witness, the witnesses that are speaking, the three, will present for 5 minutes, and I will interrupt if you move over 5 because we are stretched for time today. So we'll begin with Ville de Montréal with Madame Doré. Monsieur Doré, sorry.
Oui, très bien, merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Hello, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for hosting me today and for giving me and the City of Montreal the opportunity to participate in this discussion as part of its study of the Housing Accelerator Fund. The City of Montreal welcomes the investments announced by the Government of Canada in the last budget with regards to housing and, more generally, the amounts invested in recent years through the National Housing Strategy. By recognizing the importance of housing and the existence of a real housing crisis, the Government of Canada is making an undeniable contribution to achieving concrete results. We therefore welcome the creation of the Housing Accelerator Fund, a proposal that complements other recent federal housing initiatives. Before I discuss our expectations for this new fund, I would like to take a moment to outline the specific situation in Montreal. In Montreal, we've had record years in terms of real estate construction and unit additions, and we have had a housing boom, but despite this, we're facing an explosion in property prices and rents, and the system is overheating. Part of the issue is supply, but to adequately address the current housing crisis, it is important to act now, and specifically on the construction of non-market, social, and affordable housing. The City of Montreal has demonstrated that it can quickly put in place the tools to achieve this. Among the solutions already in place, we went ahead with an inclusion strategy, which recently evolved into a bylaw for a mixed metropolis that sets out the terms for the inclusion of social, affordable, and family housing in private residential development projects. In addition, over the last year, the city has added the right of preemption for social housing and more general housing purposes. This allows the city to act on land by acquiring land to concretely help the development of projects. These tools are at the heart of a strategy that aims, with the city's partners, to accelerate the preservation and construction of 60,000 units of affordable housing over the next 10 years, in addition to the construction of 2,000 social housing units per year. The city did not wait to act. We have ambitious targets. The city developed mechanisms to achieve this and to continue to add to its toolbox. The metropolis also relies on both private and community partners who have projects ready to go, but they cannot do so because of a lack of adequate funding. So at the city and with our local partners, what we need from the various levels of governments, we need 4 things: stable, predictable, and recurring funding, delivered quickly and directly to cities to fund non-market, affordable, and social projects. So we have to concentrate financial resources for the construction. Flexibility in the use of funds. The city knows the needs, knows how to produce solutions, knows the local players, and knows how to work with them. We saw the success of ICRL. It's a good example of this. 3, a coordinated and optimized approach. The multiplication of programs, terms, and conditions is a hindrance to the acceleration of projects. Federal programs must be coherent and truly respond to local needs, and they absolutely must align with provincial and municipal programs. 4, an approach that takes into account the consideration of the particularities and challenges of large urban centers, to limit urban sprawl, to increase the density of territories in an intelligent way. I reiterate that the municipalities are best positioned to identify opportunities and respond to local needs. We have the agility to act and create partnerships with the private and community sectors. We've proven this, and we want to continue to do so, provided we have the financial support. It should be noted that the problem of acceleration is not really related to regulatory barriers such as zoning or permitting. The problem is elsewhere. It has to do with the exponential growth in land values, construction costs on the rise, shortages of labor and building materials. In short, the costs of development are escalating and holding back affordable and social projects. In this regard, the Housing Accelerator Fund is a unique opportunity for the federal government to provide concrete and timely support to cities that are on the front lines of the housing crisis. We therefore invite you to continue to work with Canada's major cities and to accelerate the preservation and construction of affordable and social housing. I'll conclude by briefly touching on the Federal Lands Initiative access to surplus public buildings.
Merci beaucoup,
Thank you.
Follow up in the answer round. Now to Mayor Node Reardon for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, members of the committee, and thank you for the opportunity to address you today on this critical issue for the City of St. John. I am Mayor Donna Node Reardon, and I'm pleased to be here on behalf of our city to introduce this topic. First, let me say we do commend the federal government and this committee for your leadership and action on the affordable housing agenda. And we welcome this opportunity to engage with the committee to ensure that the needs of smaller cities like St. John are front and center in the design of the Housing Accelerator program. And I would now like to pass the floor to our city manager, John Collin, to deliver our remarks. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. I am indeed honored to be here speaking on behalf of our community, and I will, of course, limit my comments to the St. John perspective. When it comes to affordable housing, the City of St. John is in crisis. We estimate that in 2021, home ownership was not achievable by 60% of the households in St. John. And approximately 40% of our very large rental household community did not have access to affordable housing. We know that affordability issues continue to have severe impact on the quality of life of our citizens, and that the crisis will worsen without intervention. We also believe that there are many more living very close to the line, if you will. And with housing costs on a dramatic upward curve, there is no doubt that our needs for affordable housing will increase significantly in the years to come. Please allow me to offer a few quick themes. First, as you develop this program, it is, in our opinion, important that the funding be provided directly to the municipalities without any requirement to pass through the province or to have matching dollars. The need is too great to slow the process down or to leave money on the table because provincial matching dollars or support are not potentially achieved in a timely manner. It is, after all, the municipalities that best understand their local situations and how to solve them. My next point is on eligibility criteria. We urge you to make them as broad as possible. Every municipality is different and has different needs, so one size does not fit all. Also, as we develop our plans, we are trying to be bold and innovative. Restrictive criteria would limit the creative solutions. Funding should cater to the entire range of possibilities, including the staffing or horsepower for the development thereof. The program should recognize that smaller cities like St. John need to take a balanced approach that aligns with innovative urban plans that do not place unnecessary burdens on the private sector to build the much needed supply, and that keep us nimble and quick through the approval processes. At the same time, we need to ensure that the core housing needs of our most marginalized citizens are met by addressing the entire housing continuum and not just affordable housing. We would also recommend streamlining funding applications. While we recognize the need for oversight, and we do have a small professional planning team able to pursue opportunities, approvals must be quick and easy to achieve. I think we would all agree that the hard work should be in the creation of the solutions and not in the completion of funding forms. In closing, I will leave you with a few more statistics. St. John is now experiencing rents that are comparable to mid-sized cities. Yet the average family income in St. John is approximately and only about $66,000 per year before tax. But the story is much more compelling because it's also a tale of haves and have-nots. Over 30% of our renter households make less than $35,000 a year, and some much less. Using a standard definition of affordable housing, which is 30% of total family income, we estimate that our greatest need is for units in the $500 to $800 per month range. I would suggest to you that it does not matter how innovative we may be, developers cannot produce these units for that cost per door. We simply do not enjoy the economy of scale that larger cities may have and use to drive down construction prices. We need significant direct funding assistance and special programs, and the time for them is now. I am joined here today by a Commissioner of Growth and Community Services, Jacqueline Hamilton, and between her, me, and the Mayor, we would be pleased to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Mr. Collins, now to Mayor Taylor of Newmarket for 5 minutes. Mr. Mayor.
Great, thanks very much. I'm here speaking as Mayor of Town of Newmarket. We're about 90,000 people. York Region Council as well. That's about 1.2 million people. I'm also here as the Chair of Housing York. So Housing York is our regionally owned housing corporation responsible for providing housing to low and moderate incomes. We have about 43 community housing providers in York Region we work with, and we manage and maintain just over 2,700 homes and 36 properties across all 9 cities, towns, and townships. And we are providing subsidized and market rental options for more than another 4,500 residents. Our properties are very well maintained, and we're financially sustainable in each property. York Region, like residents across the Greater Toronto area and other parts of the country, has seen unprecedented affordable housing challenges. Ownership affordability is out of reach for most households. This is a very important piece here, with recent analysis showing that in 2021, less than 1% of new ownership supply, and we're talking about supply today a lot, 1% was affordable to households with incomes at or below the 6th income decile. That means 60% could only afford 1% of what was built. And that's for those who earned $132,000 a year in their house or less. They could not afford anything but that 1%. 99% was out of their reach. We also have a rental housing challenge in York Region, a massive one. The 2016 census found we have low supply. York had the lowest proportion of rental in the GTA. And we have an affordability challenge with 52% of renters spending more than 30% of their income towards housing. We've seen growth in the purpose-built rental market, but only 275 units were constructed in 2021 for a population of 1.2 million. We also have a historic deficit of community housing, limiting our ability to provide homes for people living with low incomes. We have the lowest proportion of historical community housing supply compared to other large municipalities in Ontario. We have a 15,000 household wait list that can be up to 11 years on average. We're able to offer subsidies about 350 applicants per year, but the wait list grows by about 760 applicants per year. So in response to these issues, York Region Council declared a housing crisis in 2021 and initiated a housing affordability task force to identify solutions. Like most municipalities, we're doing our part, including increasing the community housing supply by more than 1,200 units since 2006. We funded 66% of the capital cost for new supply from municipal tax base, with the federal and provincial governments funding the remainder. We're providing grants to offset development charges for not-for-profit housing developments, and we're setting ambitious goals to double the supply of community housing development through Housing York's strategic plan. Accessing available federal programs, including the Co-Investment Fund, where we've had some success, and the Wrapping Housing Initiative, where our application was unfortunately turned down twice due to program demand. Again, 1.2 million people, 2 applications turned down. Introducing a regional development charge deferral program we've done for market rental housing developers to add to the purpose-built rental supply, which is working somewhat. Creating a community housing development master plan to establish a development pipeline to increase Housing York and nonprofit housing supply. So that's just a few examples of what we're doing. We know it takes an all-government approach, and we know there isn't just one solution, of course. We were encouraged to see the 2022 federal budget focus on housing affordability, including commitments to restructure the rental construction financing initiative to require deeper levels of affordability and updating the co-investment fund to provide an increased share of grant funding over loans. Success of these programs in the York Region has been limited. They require proponents to access funding on a project-by-project basis, making it difficult to plan for the long term. We also continue to receive cost-shared funding from the federal Ontario government, but it's a fraction of what is needed to address our housing priorities, and they expect it to decline in the coming years. We were also encouraged to see that the budget committed to a $4 billion housing accelerator fund with the goal of 100,000 new homes across Canada by 2025. We're increasingly hearing more supply is needed to address affordability and ensure we can accommodate our growing population. As you consider the design of this program, there's some key principles to keep in mind, please. The complexity of the issue and the wide-ranging needs of Canadians makes it critical for the federal government to be clear in identifying the issue the accelerator is trying to solve. What type of housing will the program accelerate, and how will that be accomplished? We need to accelerate the right type of supplies. This includes affordable and family-sized housing. One lesson learned to date since the launch of the National Housing Strategy is that government investment should be targeted based on needs. In York Region, well, with added supply to meet growth targets, prices have continued to escalate, suggesting demand factors also pose an issue. We are required by the Planning Act of Ontario to have a 3 to 7 year supply. We have a 4.5 year supply. These homes are not affordable, and the problem will worsen as construction and labor costs continue to escalate. We've also found that new homes that meet the provincial definition of affordability in the region's monitoring tend to be one-bedroom investor condos. Housing options for families are increasingly limited, including first-time home buyers. Actions that focus on increasing supply without affordability requirements miss addressing demand factors, including the impact speculation has in the market. So through the accelerator, the federal government should incentivize the supply we need most, ownership and rental housing in particular for low and moderate income households. This can be achieved by attaching affordability requirements and size standards to the funding. The accelerator could require municipalities to adopt inclusionary zoning policies, which is often the only two available to require developers to build affordable supply. If the government is providing per-door funding through the accelerator, allow municipalities to use the funds to ensure inclusionary zoning can provide deeper affordability and sufficiently sized homes for families. The program won't be successful if it only secures small one-bedroom units. Second, a Canada-wide housing accelerator needs to be flexible. While the 2022 budget spoke to upfront funding investments in municipal planning approvals, many municipalities experiencing growth pressures like York Region and several of its local municipalities have already updated their technology and business processes. The province of Ontario has also offered financial support for similar initiatives. The accelerator needs to be flexible enough to support municipalities that have already made these improvements to allow for us to use the funding for other supply-related alternatives. This could include tools like funding to offer fee waivers, rebates for development charges, permit fees, HST land transfer, funding for pre-development work and capital gains, etc. A one-size-fit approach will not work.
I have to ask you to conclude your remarks shortly.
Okay, I want to summarize by saying that the Housing Accelerator Fund is one part of a much bigger program where a variety of approaches are needed to accelerate transitional housing, rental housing, subsidized units, portable benefits, housing trust, and affordable ownership. Each of these approaches must be accelerated in order to begin to claim progress in the efforts providing affordable housing. That is why I have stressed the need for a flexible program so the Accelerator Fund can work with and support a variety of approaches to housing affordability. I have been at the community level for 15 years working on each of these approaches to provide affordability, sometimes successful, sometimes not. Let me stress that this is not just about increasing supply, and it is certainly not just about improving municipal process. It is about the need to invest significantly in many different approaches to affordability. It is about providing a variety of housing types and tenure to meet the different needs of a wide variety of residents. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. We'll now go to Mr. Leipert for 6 minutes. Mr. Leipert, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for attending today and all of those who participated in this study. I've listened quite intently through the various presentations over the past couple of weeks. I want to take a little bit of a different approach to the questions today because many of the presentations are quite similar. Almost all ask for more money. Almost all cite issues with money getting to where it needs to go. Most cite bureaucratic hiccups along the way. So I'd like to, I believe that the rental market and the purchase market are very much tied. If rents are high, then that impacts the price of a home. So I know that as conservatives at this table, we're probably in the minority. In fact, I'd say we're probably the only party that sits at this table that doesn't believe that government is the answer to everything. In fact, I believe many of the issues that we find ourselves in today is because government has gotten itself in the middle of where it shouldn't be. The one issue that I want to throw out that I've heard nobody talk about, I don't think I've heard one single presentation, is the issue of rent controls. I don't know which provinces have rent controls and which ones don't. I do know Ontario does because it applies to my rented apartment as a member of Parliament in Ottawa. But I know in Alberta, as an example, we've always resisted the idea of rent controls. And I don't think our housing problem in Alberta is anywhere near as dire as what has been presented from other parts of the country. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about what each one of the presenters thinks about rent controls and what impact rent controls have on the housing market in their particular province. I'd start with the mayor of Newmarket, please.
Thanks very much. I'll be quick. I'm no expert in this area, but I will say that I've spoken with a number of people, private developers that are either attempting or are producing market rent buildings. And I would say this, it's a fine balance. I think no work or legislation related to market rent or to having rent control is very difficult to provide anything close to affordable housing. At the same time, there is certainly no question that it does pose a considerable concern for those developing rental housing, purpose-built rental housing, and the impact it can have on the viability of their project. What I heard in the end, though, was this, that most of them are comfortable with the rent controls if they would just be stable and predictable, and they would like to see governments, one government to the next government to the next government, not constantly change the rent control rules and regimens, so that they know what they're dealing with and their pro formas can reflect it. And I think I think I would say that is that stability in an approach, a multi-year stability and approach to rent controls is very valuable. But it certainly is a concern to those building, and we need the supply to increase as well. So it's a fine balance.
I think someone had their hand up. I'm not sure, but is there any other comments you want to make?
If I may, again, John Collins, City Manager in St. John. When it comes to rent controls, I agree it is a fine balance. One thing to consider for smaller communities such as ours is the reality is we do not have a plethora of developers, and therefore anything we do that affects their bottom line would cause them to reflect as to whether or not the development is worth proceeding with or whether they ought to go elsewhere for that development. So rent controls can be a double-edged weapon if you are not careful. And certainly from our perspective, we are carefully looking at the challenges associated with rent control. We may solve one problem and create a larger one in the process that dramatically affects our supply. Thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
You're on mute, Monsieur Doré.
Oui, donc Benoît Doré, Ville de Montréal. Je pense que
Benoît Doré, City of Montreal. So yes, I think that we have to strike a balance. I think that we have to create a lot of residential housing units. At the same time, we have to be able to act on the price. So we have to be able to control this. So I think that we have to strike a balance. But we also have to speak to withdrawing rent control. I don't think that's the solution. I think that we really have to find a balance, and we have to be able, for a segment of the population, to control the price.
You've got 35 seconds.
Well, I just like to, okay, thanks, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to throw one other thing out there, and somebody can comment it quickly if they would like to. What factor does NIMBYism play? I know in Calgary we had a real issue around initiatives to develop things like basement suites, yet it's opposed by the neighborhoods. Would anybody like to comment on that?
I'll say something really quickly. I'll just say this. I think I hear this conversation all the time. It exists. It's a factor, but I think it's considerably overblown in what role it plays in building purpose-built rental, affordable housing, et cetera. I think it's a much, much smaller consideration than it once was.
The city of St. John is...
we have to conclude with that. We'll now go to Mr. Long for 5 minutes. Mr. Long, or 6 minutes. Mr. Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses this afternoon, especially the ones from my riding of St. John. Look, I mean, I'd say as a member of Parliament in this riding, it's certainly been one of the most frustrating things that I've seen and I've dealt with. Is just the lack of affordable housing, the crisis that we're in with respect to affordable housing, and certainly pleased to hear, our mayor and you, Mr. Collin, recognize that it is an emergency. We've also consistently heard through the testimony so far that we need to get money in the hands of municipalities and cut through the red tape. Because again, we've heard and we've learned that who knows better how to invest that money, who should have their own strategies to deal with their own unique situations. And obviously, further to that, we certainly know that not all municipalities are the same. They have different needs. And my first question to you, and it can be to Ms. Hamilton or Mr. Collin, share with the committee how that money could best be used. And I won't lead you, but, could it be invested in land or administration, what have you? Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, the short answer to that question is through a variety of different ways. I do not believe there is one holy egg or holy grail that will solve the affordable housing crisis in St. John. We need to take a look at it all, from subsidies to land acquisition to special training programs for developers and architects to find ways to drive costs down, to increased horsepower and staffing to get the programs moving forward, to keep our very envious permit turnaround times and zoning change times to the reasonable levels to achieve the supply. So there is a variety of different aspects. During my opening remarks, I commented about please keep the number of criteria to a minimum. I'll be a bit cavalier to conclude my remarks by saying the only criteria that I believe should be in place is that the municipality have a plan, have a well thought out plan. Period. If that is the case, then let the municipality look at all of their different innovative approaches to solve their problem. Thank you.
And thank you for that, Mr. Collin. I want to drill down on that with you a little bit more, though. I mean, certainly from my experiences, we can get money from the federal government to municipality through, Federal Co-Investment Fund, which we launched, a few years back, the Rapid Housing Initiative, which has had great success. I mean, certainly overprescribed, but we recognize as the federal government, we need to do more, and we can't just wait for the provinces to, move on their, affordable housing money to something that has to be matched by the federal government. So can you elaborate a bit more as to, again, from the City of St. John's standpoint, and, certainly recognize you have an affordable housing action plan. Can you give us some recommendations as to what the accelerator could do to help you move that affordable action plan forward?
Well, first of all, in terms of distributing the money, I would respectfully suggest that maybe stealing a page out of the gas tax fund approach would be useful, where the money is provided directly to the municipalities, and we've spoken about that. What could it achieve for us? At the end of the day, we have to get the cost per door down. Without the cost per door coming down, rents will simply not be in that 30% of total family income, which is a good measure for affordable housing. How do you get the cost per door down? You come up with clever land acquisition schemes. You come up with building incentives You come up with special training programs to design and develop buildings that are less costly to build. And we can do all of those things within the affordable housing plan. And the beauty about such an approach is you can also roll in all of your key stakeholders within the municipality, not-for-profits who have been doing this for a very long time, and you can align your efforts so that you take advantage of the strengths of all of the various entities within a municipality to drive the cost per door down.
Okay, thank you. Chair, I'd like to share the rest of my time with MP Van Buyden. Thank you.
How much time do I have, Mr. Chair?
And losing.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll direct my questions to Mayor Taylor. We've heard a lot about the funding should go directly to municipalities. And my question to Mayor Taylor would be is, what kind of criteria do you think she should be using to determine which municipalities would be able to access funding? And I'm saying that in the context of you've got single-tier municipalities, you've got large metropolitan areas, you have municipalities that have regional oversight. How would we go about selecting which municipalities should be candidates for funding?
I think the money should go to the service provider. And so in Ontario, that means either the large single tiers like Toronto or the regions like York or Peel. They have the expertise, the sophistication, the staff resources to make sure that this money is being used in the best possible manner, and they have multiple ways of deploying it in the appropriate areas of need at that time.
Okay, do I have a few seconds? Or? Done.
You'll have to speak to Mr. Long. Madame Chabot, pour cesse.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you to all our witnesses. Thank you for your statements. Mr. Doré, I would have a question for you. I think that you didn't have the time to deal with this, and I'm going to give you the opportunity to do this. With regards to the study that we have before us, we also know that there's the issue of the initiatives of federal lands, that this could be put at the disposal of municipalities or other organizations to increase housing stock. What's your opinion on this? Thank you. Thank you. I was out of time, but what I was saying is that this federal lands initiative is very virtuous. This being said, there's a lot of opacity. This program is opaque. It's really hard to obtain information. We're the City of Montreal. It's a huge Canadian city, and we're not able to obtain where the lands are, the typology, is it a contaminated site, all the information. So it's not possible. And so if we go on the internet site that we're referred to, unfortunately, there's no land. It's written that there is no land. So there should be. So this is extremely difficult. And I think that at the same time, the government should also make sure that land under the housing initiative should be available to create social and community housing, affordable housing. This is the case in Montreal with the Peel area. There's a huge planning initiative in this sector rather, but unfortunately the land is not being prioritized for social and community housing. This would be one of the first contributions that could be done. It would be huge. It would be these lands, these federal lands, and this could help the City of Montreal and could also house thousands of people. I have other questions. In my 6 minutes, I know time is flying by. You talked a lot about construction. We know the time that it takes, and particularly now with the worker shortage, and more specifically with the supply chain initiative, the supply chain difficulties. So you're talking about acquisition in City of Montreal, and to acquire housing, to make sure that this will be destined to affordable housing over the longer term. Do you think this is a good idea? In the construction, this will take a lot of years. And right now we have a shortage of housing stock. So how can we speed up the process so we can bridge the gap between the supply and the demand? I completely agree. We need a mix of both. Already, the city is building with the regulation, with the new programs, with the ICRL, with Accès Logis Montréal. And so we have to put this in the construction pipeline. But what we can do right now, more quickly, because it takes a long time to build, is to withdraw some housing from the market, to buy it, to renovate it. And in Montreal, we believe in this. We already funded Axe 3, so for social and community housing that is affordable. We funded organizations that purchase housing. They renovate over a certain amount of time with a plan and a certain deadline, and then they make sure that affordability will be over the longer term. With the 60,000 that we hope to create over the next 10 years, there will be a large segment of this that will be social housing. And so will be to acquire these housing units and to maintain affordable rents. So this $4 billion fund is really important, but that's for all of Canada, and it's over 5 years. How will this support your efforts for the City of Montreal? And we know the issues are quite well documented in Montreal, and I'm quite concerned also when Mr. Doré and other witnesses, you're saying to give to the municipalities. Well, if I look at Quebec, Quebec has the Société d'Habitation du Québec, and we know the programs. We have over 1,000 municipalities. I can talk about Tadoussac. We know there's a housing crisis in municipalities with 800 people living there. So there will be an equity program if we say to send this directly to municipalities. What do you think? Well, I think that a proportion that would be interesting, you could reserve a certain share for larger municipalities. I think it was mentioned, the expertise exists. There are people that are able to act. But this being said, maybe we should reserve 50% of the fund for other municipalities that will have to partner. So it's altogether possible. I understand that there can be a housing crisis in Tadoussac. It's throughout Quebec right now, not just in the city of Montreal. I do recognize that.
Madame Chabot et Monsieur Doré. Madame Zarrillo, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm not sure if my headset will be appropriate. Can you just check the sound? And if not, I'll have to cede my time.
We'll wait for the translation to give us.
All right, I'll just speak again, Mr. Chair, if you can just verify that this headset will be appropriate or adequate.
Yeah, she gave a thumbs up.
Okay,
no,
wonderful,
no,
thank you.
Madame Zarrillo, no, we're getting a thumbs down on. She cannot.
No worries,
I will.
I'll cede my time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madame Zarrillo. And we remind members they need the House of Commons headset to participate. We'll now go to Mr. Ruff for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Chair. So I just got some simple questions right off the get-go here for all the witnesses. I'm just sort of looking for almost yes/no feedback here to get us going. First off, if each of the cities could just provide one, number of housing units and rental units that they're short. Number two, the average household price and rental price for their respective communities. And number three, do they have any land in their municipality that meets the federal lands initiative, yes or no? If we could start with Newmarket, please.
Wow, I'm not sure I'm talented enough to remember all of them and get yes or no answers. I apologize. I don't believe we have a shortage of housing supply. And I would urge this committee not to make this all about housing supply and municipal process. We are short on certain and subsidized housing, as I said, 15,000 person wait list. Our average rent is about $3 a square foot, and its average home price is about 1.3 million. And finally, in terms of land, I'm not sure what the criteria is you referred to, but I can tell you this. I actually believe that land purchasing, dollars to purchase land should not be supported. Government at all levels have the land needed, either in raw form or for intensification purposes. That land should come from government at no cost. And that's why I moved a motion successfully at York Region that each city and town in the region provide 2 acres of land every 5 years for an affordable housing project. And we're moving that forward. Thank you.
Montreal.
Je peux malheureusement pas vous donner.
Unfortunately, I can't give you the exact amount, but we can send this to you with great pleasure. Understand that at the City of Montreal, there are 28,000 people on the waiting list to obtain social and community housing. So, of course, we have huge needs, but I will send the data.
St. John?
From the City of St. John, we can provide to the committee our entire housing needs assessment that was just recently completed, which lays out a number of the figures you're seeking for. The short answer is there's well over 2,000 on the waiting list, and I did refer to the fact that we have many that are just on the line on top of that. So that number will be going up. In terms of land, there is no shortage of land in the City of St. John. We can find the land that is necessary to build the units, but we are also fixed on mixed neighborhoods, and therefore that becomes a challenge in terms of making the necessary lands available in all of the various neighborhoods.
Thank you. Yeah, so it'd be great if all the communities could just get that data sent into the committee. One of the interesting things that previous witnesses have brought up is the fact that in the mandate letter to the minister, it talks that the Housing Accelerator Fund is directed at the largest cities. We've got confirmation since that in the budget that it is going to be for smaller and rural communities, recognizing that the 3 municipalities represented here today or that testifying, you're all considerably larger than my neck of the woods, with my largest city of Owen Sound being only just over 22,000 people. My question is, really though, what percentage of this funding from the federal side should be broken down and protected for smaller and rural communities? I'm interested in St. John, your first take. You're the smallest community, I think, represented here today, testimony.
Well, if I may, I'd like to piggyback on Mayor Taylor's comment. I think it should be primarily focused on service providers. A lot of the smaller communities are provided the service of housing from larger regional entities, et cetera. In New Brunswick, we don't have a regional government structure, so it is the cities themselves. So I believe there needs to be some sort of mathematical calculation for all of the various service providers, whatever level of municipal government they are at, to make a determination as to what their proportionate share should be within their communities.
Newmarket?
I would just generally agree. I think it's not the size of the community; it's the role the community plays. So whether as a sort of a more urban center for surrounding smaller places, or as a service provider. But if you have all these small municipalities who aren't really in housing and don't have the expertise and the housing staff trying to all of a sudden grapple with this, I think that'll be inefficient and probably lead to not the best use of dollars. But we serve communities around us. There's the service providers who can do it for the entire catchment area and do it well.
In Montreal, just real quick.
Oui, j'ai déjà mentionné que 50% de...
I already mentioned that 50% should be reserved for large municipalities, large Canadian cities, and 50% for the other municipalities. Quebec's reality is different with regards to the regional distribution.
Just a final comment to Mr. Collin. Good seeing you again.
Mr. Ruff, now to Mr. Long to conclude this hour's witness or questioning. Mr. Long, for 5 minutes.
Chair, I cede my time to MP Van Buyden.
Okay, Mr. Van Buyden. For 5
Thank you,
minutes.
Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Long. Mayor Taylor, as a mayor of a municipality, could you share with the committee some of the main challenges facing the municipalities that impact the processing of construction applications? We keep hearing that there's too long of a development cycle. So how can the federal government support municipalities to accelerate the housing construction process? And only as 3 examples, could there be things like changes to building codes which would require secondary dwelling units? Should we fund additional staff for processing applications? Or should we fund something along the lines of an end-to-end process review to streamline the development processes at the municipal level?
I would quickly say none of the above. I think it's an absolute myth that's been developed. It's caught hold in Ontario and it's caught hold in the media that the problem with supply and affordability has to do with municipal processes. And I think I utterly reject that concept. I think that if you wanted to direct money to support, let's say, the housing provider in a very specified way that wasn't around actual building, I would do it in a way that provided dollars to service providers or larger urban centers to support not-for-profits to work through the process themselves who struggle with planning and with architecture fees and with the capacity to do it. There's a lot of not-for-profits and faith-based groups out there that want to step into this need, but don't have the dollars and sophistication to do it. And if we were funded to support them, we could maybe accelerate some housing that way. But I honestly believe strongly that spending $4 billion to try to improve municipal process is really not the right way to go. Thank you.
I'll cede my time to Soraya.
Merci, Jean. Merci, mon collègue. Ma question.
Thank you. My question is for all the witnesses, but more specifically, Mr. Dore. It's a pleasure to see you virtually here in Ottawa. My question will be to come back to municipal funding. So all 3 of you said that it was very important that the funding be given directly to municipalities. The municipalities are full aware of the issues, the needs that they have locally. None of you have mentioned the Canadian Federation of Municipalities. So could the Canadian Federation of Municipalities be an interesting or an important vehicle to address this issue of funding, all the while respecting the issue of rural versus urban? Mr. Dore. Thank you. Thank you for the question. It's a pleasure for me to see you virtually once again. I would not be against that the Canadian Federation of Municipalities could be a vehicle or an entity that would participate, but I don't see any advantage to this. So I think that municipalities, by having the less intermediaries as possible, of course, in Quebec it's specific, but I would say that I don't see the advantage, really, of going through the Canadian Federation of Municipalities. So how then can you make sure that money will be directly sent to municipalities, for example, in Quebec? How could this work, in your opinion? Well, this is the issue. This is what we oftentimes see with Quebec. There are you can go through the Privy Council, or perhaps you can look at different modalities with the Canadian Federation of Municipalities. But this being said, it's very difficult for some programs that exist right now with the Canadian Federation of Municipalities and the Canadian government. So, of course, there are probably advantages. This could be analyzed and looked at more closely. It might be a solution, but it doesn't solve everything. There are certain issues for some programs where this federation is the intermediary. Thank you.
If I may, St. John thinks very highly of SCM. In fact, they have funded several consultant type projects for us, not necessarily to do with affordable housing. But I don't personally see a need for another intermediary, and I'm not sure they would have the staffing horsepower to act as that intermediary in any event for a project as large as the Housing Accelerator program that we're speaking about here today. Still very much a strong preference to find a way for direct funding from the federal government into the municipalities without additional intermediaries and additional documentation and justification required to all sorts of different entities. Thank you.
Martinez Ferrada, and to all the witnesses for appearing today and providing the valuable testimony you have during the time in this meeting. You could see an hour is a short period of time with this very important topic. Before the committee adjourns, the witnesses can leave. I would ask for a few minutes on committee business to consider a request that this committee has received from FINA. Clerk, have the witnesses left? Committee members, if we could just give me your indulgence for 5 minutes. On Thursday, FINA, the Finance Committee, adopted a motion inviting HUMA to consider a subject matter on Part 5, Divisions 26, 27, 29, and 32 of Bill C-19. This would have to be done by Friday of next week if we were going to consider. The Finance Committee will still review the section of the bill clause by clause and amend it where it choose and approve it. So UMA's being asked to review it and provide recommendations if they choose. Having said that, if we're going to do it, we would possibly have to sit during constituency week. So I'm at the direction of the committee members. Finance will still review it. Madame Shabat had her hand up, then Madame Kuzi. Madame Shabat?
We know that this is a bill with a lot of sections. It's 500 pages long. We call it an omnibus act, but it's an act to implement the budget. But what we're talking about here, divisions 26, 27, 29, and 32 of the bill, these divisions concern employment insurance. I think that it would be appropriate for HUMA to study this and to hear witnesses speak. I think it's quite justified for FINA to ask us to study this, and I do agree.
Madame Kuzi?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with my colleague from the bloc that this is relevant to our committee. I think the time frame's very unfair. 2 weeks. It's not a lot of time really for this and for the weight of the issues that we're considering. And I'm seeing nodding. EI benefits, as my colleague pointed out there. Amending the Canadian Labour Code, these are significant things, as well as, I'm sure is very important to Ms. Zarillo, the EI Board of Appeal, something that will allow those whose claims are denied to have their opportunity to say. And, this is significant, and I think that it merits not only our rescheduling of the meeting on Thursday to evaluate this, but also 2 meetings next week. I think 3 would be the bare minimum we could do to provide justice to this issue. And I also think when we're dealing with such sweeping, impactful legislation, the ministers have to be accountable. And in my opinion, that includes Labor, Finance, and ESDC. So, Mr. Speaker, I should say, Mr. Chair, I really don't want to waste a lot of time going back and forth. I think Madame Martinez Ferrada is always pretty clear in her mind in terms of what her team has been informed as to what they're willing to do. So, I am asking for 3 meetings, and I'm seeing agreement here. I can't tell from Madame Zarillo on the screen. And then, as I said, those 3 ministers. So, if Madame Martinez Ferrada could respond as to what the government had in mind, because if they put this time frame in front of us, then I'm sure they have an idea as to what they're willing to do. And then I guess we'll leave it to the decision of the committee to decide if they find what the government suggests, which I hope will be what I've suggested, and what this merits. And again, especially given the time frame, acceptable. So thank you, Chair.
Before Madame Martinez-Ferreira may comment, we do realize meetings could only be scheduled on the availability of the support for those. So.
Yeah, and to that, Chair, government business always takes the precedence, so I do hope the clerk will recognize that as well.
Well, we can just put the request in if
certainly.
If the committee chooses to meet on this, because we cannot amend. We can just hear. Witness on this and input. We cannot amend or change anything through the process. Any other comments?
Yes, Monsieur le Président. Ma compréhension.
Mr. Chair, my understanding is that we need to table recommendations. We hear witnesses make recommendations before May 27th. So May 27th, that's very little time. So to think of having 3 meetings, I don't even see how we can fit this in the calendar with the committee resources, with the calendar.
Je comprends que effectivement.
I understand that it's a very important issue. Can we have 1 meeting? I mean, physically, I don't even see how we can do that, how you can fit it in the calendar. So it's not a lack of goodwill. It's just a question of house resources in the calendar. Now, eventually, should the committee look at this? Well, we cannot make any amendments. And so my proposal, can we perhaps make a motion as a committee to have this discussion? I don't really see how we can do this within the calendar that's being suggested. And to end, let's not forget that if it's studied clause by clause at finance.
Next week, doing this before the 27th of May, where all the parties are represented.
Sitting all next week and reviewing
they're sitting all like long hours to do this clause by clause, and all parties are represented there. So.
Madame Kuzi, then Madame Shabat, and Mr. Ruff.
And again, I mean, I feel very strongly it was your government that created this short timeline, and you have to allow for the House of Commons to do their work prudently. If this was referred to us, we have an obligation as a committee to do the work. 2 weeks isn't enough. The will we've seen from the bloc already to that it's important to the committee. I hope Madame Zerillo feels the same. And so, I don't buy that, we don't have a lot of time. That's on your government for not giving us the time to examine it. I feel it's your obligation as their representative on this committee to ensure that we are given the time and the resources to evaluate this in the capacity. At the level that this responsibility was given to us. My office found out about this morning. That it's not fair, and if in its unfairness, you should allow the committee in every way possible to do the work that we've been charged with. I think that's the minimum you and your government can do, given the last minute way we receive this and the amount of time. And if you're not willing to, then as I said, that's something we'll see how the rest of the committee feels, and we'll see the outcome of it. But it's just this is on you. You can give us the time if your government can give us the time if they think it's appropriate.
Just for clarification, the motion was approved late on Thursday, and all parties were present at that meeting, so we knew when everybody else knew. So be it. Madame Shabat? Madame Shabat, did you have your hand?
Oui, c'est vrai, mais...
Yes, this is true, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. We did not receive any communication from the clerk with regards to the HUMA committee to inform us of this. And we're just learning it now. I learned it 5 minutes before you talked about it. So I do have a proposal to retain that HUMA committee does study four sections of the bill that have to do with EI. It won't be an opportunity to totally reform this, of course not. We're still waiting. But we could deal with the four divisions and we could hear witnesses. I would suggest that Thursday's session be used for this and another session next week if needed, and that will be complete. Thank you.
Mr. Ruff, you had your hand up, then Madame Martinez-Ferrata.
Yeah, no, look, I just want to emphasize that, you know, exactly what the instruction that did come out from the committee late last Friday afternoon to us all is that the Finance Committee referred this to us. They are, as you know, have a 500-page plus Budget Implementation Act to review. We're the experts when it comes to or this committee and get the appropriate witnesses and level of review needed to provide those recommendations back. I think it's actually very responsible of the Finance Committee to, I don't know what other committees were, you know, given out this responsibility to dig into it, but that's our job, is to dig into it and do our part. And we need to do as much as we can before the deadline that they gave us. So let's get to work.
Martinez-Ferrata.
Just for everybody's understanding, my understanding is that the Finance Committee will study this clause by clause. All the same witnesses will be at Finance and will come here. So we're doubling the witnesses to the work that the Finance Committee is doing. My understanding is that we cannot decide what articles we're studying. Finance will send those to us if we want to, right? So those are the ones that we can study, but the same witnesses will find at Finance Committee. So I don't see how we can have 3 meetings by here between the 27th of May if all the same resources will be supporting Finance Committee. So I'm just saying this is, and again, to your point, all parties are represented at the Finance Committee. So we're actually going to be doubling the witnesses' time and the study of clause by clause.
I believe Madame Chabot had her hand up, Madame Gladue, and Mr. Ruff, and I remind the committee we are beyond our timeline, and we will adjourn shortly if we do not come to a conclusion.
Mr. Chair, with all due respect, if FINA thought it good to send it back to us, to the International Trade Committee, to other committees, it's to make sure that within our expertise we can study these questions that matter to our committee. And I appreciate it from FINA. And now we would tell them, no, thank you, you're going to do the work anyway, no need for us to do it. I find that, I mean, I'm summarizing here, but I don't find that it would be us doing our due diligence. If they took the time to refer this to us, to ask us to look into these employment issues, then I think we should seize the opportunity. And in my opinion, 2 meetings with witnesses would be enough. We could just plan one for next week and take Thursday's meeting for this. I would be ready to vote, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I'll call a question on let's be clear, what's the motion then before the floor? Okay, make a motion. Because I didn't get a clear motion from Madame Chabot.
Okay, I'll start. I'll make 2 motions. I'll start with one. My first motion is that the HUMA meets 3 times between today and May 26th.
Okay, you heard the motion. I see no discussion. We'll have a vote on the motion that HUMA schedule 3 meetings between now and the 26th of May.
I want to thank the member for the motion. I would just add to that motion that we depend on resources And
that's a
so we
given.
have to put that in the motion, depending on the resource of the committee to support HUMA on having 3 meetings.
We can only schedule a meeting when services
Exactly.
are available.
So if you have a motion where we have to study clause by clause the ones that are submitted to us before the 27th of May, and then we don't do it, then we're not responding to the motion we have voted here. So I'm just saying that can we check with the clerk if we can have the support to have 3 meetings by here to the 27th of May?
The clerk would advise me as chair if we can schedule that. If we cannot schedule, then I would advise the committee.
It's also a matter of availability of services as well.
Yes.
So we just have to take a look at, I will make the request to the individuals who are responsible for service, just to make sure all the services are
But when
available.
they're organizing services, does government business take priority or not?
I'm not too certain about that. It really is,
Standing policy.
it really takes a look at the services and what is scheduled that day, but I can make the request and see if services are available that day.
So everybody's clear on the motion currently before the committee that the HUMA schedule 3 meetings prior to May 27th, prior to 27th, which would be the 26th, based on the availability of able to schedule. So we clear. Clerk will call a recorded vote.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Coteau?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Apparently, yes.
Mr. Van Bynen?
Yes.
Madame Martinez Ferrada?
Oui.
Ms. Kuzi?
In favor.
Mr. Ruff?
In favor.
Ms. Gladue?
Yes.
Mr. Leipert?
In favor?
Madame Chabot?
Oui.
Ms. Cirillo?
4.
11 yeas, 0 nays.
I don't see it. With that, oh, I thought you waved it off. Oh.
My second motion is that the ministers of Labor, Finance, and ESDC are scheduled at some time during those 3 meetings.
Any discussion? You've heard Madame Chabot.
Avec respect, je pense que les dispositions dont on parle.
With all due respect, I believe that what we're talking about here concerns the Minister of Labor and Development, but of course you can propose the motion that you wish. And the officials of Labor and Development would be important for them to be here.
Okay. I will make an amendment to the ministers of Labor and ESDC. I think those are crucial, though, because we've got EI benefits, EI Board of Appeal, and the Canadian Labor Code. Those are directly related to HUMA. I think it's completely fair to ask for those 2 ministers.
Any further discussion? Madame
We
Ferrada?
just propose a friendly amendment to our motion to invite ministers instead of like the wording you used. I would just, thank you.
Everybody is clear. I see no more discussion, so clerk will call.
What word do we usually use? Invite. Yeah, okay. Then we're inviting them. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
So it's clear. The motion before the committee, are members clear? If they are, then I'll ask the clerk to call a recorded vote.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Coteau?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yep.
Mr. Van Bynen?
Yes.
Madame Martinez Ferrada?
Oui.
Ms. Kuzi?
In favor.
Mr. Ruff?
In favor.
Ms. Gladue?
Yes.
Mr. Leipert?
In favor.
Madame Chabot?
Pour.
Ms. Cirillo?
Yes.
11 yeas, 0 nays.
Meeting adjourned.
Je veux juste m'excuser.
Excuse me, I would like to apologize. Earlier, I said that we had not received this request from FINA, and so it seems that we did receive this Friday afternoon. So I just wanted to mention that I missed it. Thank you.